So today we're going to start talking about volume in terms of pyramids and cones. And before we start getting into the details, I want you to envision that if you take a cone and fill it up with water and pour it into a cylinder, okay, it would take 3 cones to fill up that cylinder. And the same thing for a pyramid. If you take a pyramid and you fill it up with water, it would take 3 of those pyramids to fill up a prism. All right, so thus the relationship that a cone is 1/3 of a cylinder and a pyramid is 1/3 the relationship of a prism. All right, and that's how we come up with our formula. Very important. So the cone here, all right, it says the volume, I'm sorry, for the pyramid and the cone is 1/3 the product of the area of the base, that's our big B, and the height of the figure. Okay, now just a little something different in terms of the height. We might be given something called the slant height, and that is this here, and we've kind of talked about that before. All right, the slant height. The height is slanted. That's the reason it's called slant height. Now, a lot of students like to use that in terms of h, and you can't, because remember, the height is going to be that altitude, or the line that is perpendicular. Let's use a different color. The line that is perpendicular to the base. All right, so sometimes we're not given that height and we're given the slant height, and we have to find what the actual height or altitude of the figure is. And we could do that quite easily, and we'll see that in one of our problems. So remember, slant height is the distance from the vertex to any point on the edge of the base, and the altitude or the height of the figure is the perpendicular distance between the vertex, that's up here, and the base, which is down here. Okay, so the altitude here would be that perpendicular distance, okay, from that vertex down to the base. All right, so our formula is going to be for volume 1/3 big B times h, and that's going to be for our pyramid. So why don't you write that in there? And then for our cone, it's going to be 1/3 pi r squared times h. Why pi r squared? Because we know that the cone, the base, is a circle. That's where you fit the ice cream in. That's a good way of remembering for the cone. All right, that's a circle. All right, so that's going to be for our cone. All right, so let's look at example number 1. So example 1 says find the volume of the regular pyramid shown. It says round your answer to the nearest 100th. So I'm going to write down my formula because I know that that is a square pyramid. So I'm going to write down volume equals 1/3 big B, that's going to be the square, the area of the square, times the height. Well, big B is going to equal, I have here 7 centimeters. It's just going to be 7 centimeters times 7 centimeters. My h, or my height, well, that's a different story because I know I'm given the slant height here. The slant height is 11.5 centimeters. If I were to draw a line perpendicular to the base, okay, I have to find that height, the height of that altitude. Well, I know that this line perpendicular to the base forms a right triangle. So let's highlight that, the right triangle, because sometimes this is difficult for students to see. All right, so that's the right triangle. Now, what else do I know? I know that the hypotenuse is 11.5. And then I know that one leg here, well, this distance is going to be halfway. So that's going to be 3.5 centimeters. And I'm looking for the altitude. So that's going to be x. So I'm going to set up my equation, obviously using the Pythagorean theorem. So I'm going to have, let's go down here, I'm going to have 11.5 squared equals 3.5 squared plus x squared. All right, so I'm going to square, and I'm going to get 132.25 equals 12.25 plus x squared. I'm going to subtract 12.25 to both sides. And I'm going to get 120 equals x squared. All right, obviously I'm looking for x and not x squared, so I'm going to square root both sides. And I'm actually going to leave that. So I'm going to get the square root of 120. All right, now, so let's plug into our formula. So the volume, that's what I'm looking for, equals 1/3. Well, that's going to be 7 times 7 times the square root of 120. Okay, when I plug that into my calculator, I'm going to get, that's going to equal 178.9227. All right, I have to be careful. I need the nearest 100th. So that's the second decimal place. So my answer is going to be 178.92, and that's centimeters cubed. And I can fill in here that my height was the square root of 120. All right, let's look at example number 2. So example number 2 says a cone with an altitude of 25 centimeters has a volume of 675 pi centimeters cubed. Find the radius of the cone. All right, so one thing I'm going to do, or the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to write down the formula for the cone. So that's volume equals 1/3 pi times the radius squared times the height. All right, so I'm going to draw my cone. All right, not bad. All right, now I need to drop my altitude. So the altitude there is 25 centimeters. So I want to find out what the radius is. All right, so let's fill in. So I know that the volume is 675 pi. That's going to equal 1/3 pi times r squared, and that's going to be times 25. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide pi to both sides. Let's get rid of that. All right, that cancels. And now I get 675 equals 1/3 r squared times 25. What I like to do is get rid of the fraction. I know I can do that by multiplying 3 to both sides of the equation. So now I'm going to get 25. That equals r squared, or 25 r squared. Okay, I'm going to divide 25 to both sides. And I get 81 equals r squared. Okay, again, I'm not looking for r squared. I'm looking for the radius. So I'm going to square root both sides, and r equals 9 centimeters. Okay, not too bad. So what I want you to do is take your time, re-listen to the video if you need to make sure you understand what we did here in terms of looking for the volume of pyramids and cones. Obviously, I want you to write down some key ideas, and then, of course, check your understanding. We'll go over that and any questions you might have in class. Ooh, that was hard to say. Anyway, remember, go Cats, go Knights.